can pursue my destiny in the most powerful and empowered way that I possibly can. But it's going to require that I say no to my ego sometimes. That I say, you know what? I'm going to risk survival in this moment because I trust that I'm still going to actually make it out alive. The ego was designed for survival, not power. I'm gonna hit you with that one more time. The ego was designed for survival, not power. Shout out to Alicia Halpin for delivering this one to me. When I heard her say this to me, it just stopped me in my tracks. And I knew I needed to share this with the Rising Man community. Because ego is something that we talk about a lot, and I think we miss the basic function of what it's there for. So for those of you who have a basic understanding of what the ego is and how it serves and how it functions, it's designed to trigger that survival mechanism in us. We talk about the ego on a social level of how we show up with an ego, and men have a big ego. We've heard that, right? Oftentimes it's associated with a sense of arrogance and overly confident cockiness. But really, the ego is designed to help us survive. It's that heightened sense of self, that awareness of self that I'm not safe, I'm not being cared for, I don't belong here. Whatever the litany of fears or identifiers we might have, the ego is designed to recognize when there's a gap or a perceived gap in safety. So the ego helps us survive. The ego also helps us to identify threats in our environment. So the basic function of it is to make sure that we still have a pulse at the end of the day. Because if this machine is not operating, if that heart is not pumping and this body is dead, nothing else is going to happen. So first of all, let's be grateful for the ego, right? Just round of applause for the ego. For so many years, the ego's gotten a bad rap. And I think it's time that we just acknowledge, hey, the ego serves a really basic and important function. It allows me to make sure that I guarantee my survival. Wow. Thank God that there is part of my engineering that has built-in survival mechanisms so I don't have to think about it. Thank you, ego. Now, let's just push the ego aside for a second. Because yes, it helps me stay alive. Yes, it helps me to survive. But the ego is not designed to help me be powerful. In fact, the ego will encourage me and motivate me to stay small if it will keep me safe. It'll encourage me to hide, to keep my voice contained within my body, to not take a risk, to not jump off the cliff, to not go after the animal that I'm hunting if it believes that I won't survive it. So the ego, since its focus is survival and ultimately safety, it prevents us from taking those risks and taking that great, massive action in our lives that will help us become more powerful, that will help me tap into that extra 40, 50, 60% of latent potential that I'm always sitting on, just like you. Think about this for a second, right? Just the basic understanding of where in my life have I heard a voice in my head that said, but you might not survive that. Hold on, you might not make it. You might die at the end of that. You might run out of money. You might not have any friends. You might get exiled by your family. How many times has that voice crept into your head? And every time that voice wins and encourages you to hold back your voice, to shrink your power down, to get small, to just be more conservative in your approach, how many times has that led to you feeling more empowered? Maybe it led to you staying safe, staying comfortable. Maybe it even kept you alive at some point, right? Remember, thank you, ego. Those moments where you said, hey, that's bad news down the road. Don't mess with those guys because something bad's going to happen. Let's be grateful for those moments where the ego intervened. But for all the other times where the ego is just a voice in our head that we need to acknowledge and turn away from in order to access our full power and potential, those are the moments where we get to look at that ego and say, hey, thank you for everything that you've done for me. Thank you for all those times and all those moments where you've kept me safe, where you kept me out of harm, where you made sure that this heart kept pumping. Thank you. But right now, I got this one covered. We're going to be okay. You can just sit down next to me and watch. There's so many moments that I know I experience in my life that ego voice wins, where it says, but don't do that. That's too risky. That's going to be uncomfortable. What if they say no? What if it doesn't work out? So what? So what if they say no? So what if it doesn't work out? I'm determined to even turn those perceived failures into empowering experiences. On my best day, I can tell my ego, hey, listen, even if it doesn't work out, we're not going to die. We're going to be fine. I'm going to learn what I need to learn so that I can move forward into my greatness, into my excellence. I can pursue my destiny in the most powerful and empowered way that I possibly can. But it's going to require that I say no to my ego sometimes. That I say, you know what? I'm going to risk survival in this moment because I trust that I'm still going to actually make it out alive. I may not make it out unscathed. I may be scarred emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically sometimes, but I'm going to survive it because I'm determined to. I don't need you to keep me in this box, keeping me safe. A perfect metaphor for it is parenting, right? How many of the parents in the world, this helicopter parenting, this whole generation of us that had parents that were hovering around, making sure that we never bumped our knees or scraped our elbows. How many times did they keep us from taking risk and taking action that would be empowering, that would embolden us, from having those bumps and bruises that would make us stronger, more resilient, more tolerant to adversity? It's the same conversation with the ego. Hey, ego, mom, dad, older brother, I'll be okay. Thank you. Thank you for caring so much about me that you want to make sure that I'm safe. But I'm going to go and I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to take a risk. That's the decision that we get to make if we really want to empower ourselves. And sure, maybe we get to sit down and have a dialogue with the ego. Maybe it's not a simple yes or no. Maybe it's, well, let me consider what you're saying. Let's think about this for a second. You know what? You're right. Maybe if I do X, Y, and Z, it's going to have outcomes A, B, and C. That's possible. But what about this? Have that conversation, sit down, engage with the ego instead of just running into the survival response every time. And yes, let's keep the ego online for the times where we really need it. When we need the ego to keep us out of a bar fight, or we need the ego to keep us away from the dark alley or the really risky situation that could be life or death. But for everything else, let's have a conversation with the ego and see if taking the risk is actually going to make me more powerful. Because at the end of the day, the only job the ego has is to keep you and to keep me alive. It's not to make us more powerful. It's just to make sure that we stay upright with a heartbeat. Everything else, that's up to you. It's up to me. So will you take on that challenge? Will you really take that on and challenge that ego? Stand up to that ego and say, I got it covered? It's just your power we're talking about. How much do you care about your power? All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you tune in each and every week for another Monday morning meditation right here on the Rise of Men podcast. Peace.